What does it mean to be under the law? What does it mean to be under the law according to the Bible? Well, when we open up to Romans chapter 3, verse 19, Paul is speaking to all of the ex-Israelites, the non-Jews. These are the Gentiles in this area of the Greco-Roman Empire. They had been scattered. They have been absorbed in these nations through, first of all, the Assyrian captivity in 721 BCE, and then the Babylonian captivity in 586 BCE. So you have the 10 lost tribes. They're not really lost. People know where they're at, but they're ex-Israelites now. They've been divorced, cut off from God, and they have now been absorbed into all of these nations in the Greco-Roman world. And then you have the Jews that also went through that whole process, but with Babylon's captivity. And so they are all scattered all throughout as well. Now, some of them are still law-abiding, Torah observant, but most of the 10 lost tribes, the ex-Israelites, they have totally been, absorbed into the nations there. And so in all of the New Testament epistles that Paul is writing, Romans, Corinthians, Galatians, Ephesians, Philippians, Thessalonica, all of these places, we're thinking that he's writing to Gentile people, everyone that's non-Jewish, which would include us, but not necessarily. In the biblical text, the Gentiles mean of the tribe. So they're coming from the tribe themselves. It's now just a matter of, are they still a covenant member, or are they an ex-covenant member? And so Paul's vision, or his mandate, his mission, was to go into the Greco-Roman world and to call back those that were cut off from the covenant to come back into a blessed position of the covenant, because they were dead in transgression and in death, right? Covenantally speaking. So when you're looking at the New Testament, the whole Bible, in fact, it's only referring to those people that were under the law. Under the law, meaning that they were under covenantal terms. They were under a suzerain vassal treaty. They were under this kind of agreement that they've made with God. It was very legal. Now, were they in good standing? That would have been in blessed position. Or were they in cursed standing, meaning that they were in a bad position with God in their relationship? So when we think of it this way, and the framework of the Bible to be understood in this manner, then it begins to open up to us and for it to make sense. So those that were under the law, this is in Romans chapter 3, verse 19. Now we know that whatever the law says, it says to those who are under the law, so that every mouth may be silenced and the whole world held accountable to God. Therefore, no one will be declared righteous in his sight by observing the law. Rather, through the law, we become conscious of sin, Paul is saying. So in verse 19, Paul actually says here in the book of Romans, but it's really to all of the books, that whatever the law says, it says to those who are under the law. So all of the Bible, the 66 books of the Bible, it's speaking to those covenant members and those that were out of covenant at one time, that they are now trying to bring back into the fold. So outside of Adam, the people of Adam, which Adam was the father of Mesopotamia, the law and everything that pertains to the Bible has absolutely no legal or spiritual ramifications for anyone that was outside of the law. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? Let me say it this way. Anyone that was a non-Jew, non-Israelite, none of this, the law had any bearing for their own lives, according to what the Bible is saying. So because of that, who was under the law? It was Adam's people. It was from Adam, you have Noah, all of Noah's people, right? We're talking about the descendants of Adam. And then Noah came Abraham and the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. And Jacob had what? Joseph, right? Joseph became Israel, or Ephraim, right? Israel. And all the way from Israel to Moses, from Moses all the way to Jesus. That whole descendancy line, that's the tree. You have a tree system. All of those descendants were placed under the law. Anyone outside of this tree system, they were not under the law. So none of the death, the curse, the blessing, and all of that, none of that fell among anyone outside of the law. So it's very critical to understand this. We were not under the law. We were nothing part of the law. Nobody is at this point, right? Because it all ended in 70 AD. So the New Testament, Paul is writing these epistles and letters. This is all pre-70 AD. So it mattered for them in that century and at that time because it was all coming to an end, the end of the age. But for us looking back to it now, we are now recognizing that those who are under the law was under the curse, was under sin, was under grace. These are all biblical terminology. We have to understand who the audience was, and that is, we were not that audience, so we were not under the law. Paul is not speaking to us. He's speaking only to, at this point, the 12 tribes of Israel, those that were at one time, or, were excommunicated or exiled. He is still referring to them because this had national and legal promises for them and also spiritually speaking. So who was under the law? Not us. It was the 12 tribes of Israel.